guys, I want to talk today about, I don't know what to call it, color hoarding. We've seen a lot of videos recently across YouTube about art hauls and, learning your palette and that kind of thing. So I wanted to talk a little bit because I have a whole lot of colors. So, I want to talk about, I don't know if I would call it hoarding, and kind of, I guess, talk about my journey and how I ended up with a lot of colors. So I also want to talk about whether or not I regret having this many colors. So the answer to that is yes and no. A lot of people say that they don't like having so many colors because they get overwhelmed. I don't have that problem. So for those of you who are new or haven't caught it before, I have ADHD, and when we start something like a new craft, we tend to kind of go all in, and that's probably part of where I ended up with part of some of these colors, but also I just like all the colors. I was always that kid that wanted the giant box of crayons with all the colors, the one with the sharpener in the back. We all know which one I'm talking about. So I've always been that person. I love color. My houses all have colors in them, as I've moved in and painted and that kind of thing. So I'm a big fan of color. That said, because I have ADHD, I do have a really hard time with out of sight, out of mind. And so when my colors are stored away, I will end up kind of falling back on the same colors that are sitting in front of me in a palette. So I do have a hard time with that. And of course, why is it about recording that my dogs decide that they want to play and be very obnoxious and loud? Anyway, because of that, when I was not traveling for work, I did have a big whiteboard. I put magnets on the back of all my paints. I hung them up so I could see them. And then I was much more apt to use all my paints instead of just what was in the palette. And that's part of the reason I bought that giant Robax palette, because I was trying to see all my paints and use them that way. Unfortunately, with travel, that makes life a little more difficult for me, as far as using up my paints. So, like I said, I don't regret all my paints. There are some that I probably would not have bought, and some of those were colors that I saw recommended, like Opera Rose. That was a big one. Hold on. Hey guys! Can y'all take that outside? Go. Opera Rose is one in particular that I would not buy that color again. I hate that color. I don't like fluorescent colors in general, so I would not buy that one again, ever. I know that's like blasphemy among the watercolor community, but I am just not a fan. So there it is. I would not buy it again. Anyway, so that was because I didn't have dot cards and I was kind of going on recommendations and stuff. And then some colors I bought, I was chasing some colors. I started off with that Mai Liang paint, and they had a couple colors in there that I really liked. And unfortunately, they didn't list pigments, so I couldn't go by pigments. And to be fair, at that point, I hadn't learned a lot about pigments at that point. So I did a little bit of chasing color for those, and I would buy a few thinking, oh, well, this will be the closest match to that. And then it wasn't. And then I also, like I said, before I learned about pigments, didn't understand sometimes, differences among brands and that kind of thing. So as you can see, I won't show you every page, but I have a whole lot of colors. I have swatched pretty much everything I have. At least I think I have. I am probably going to sit down and go through colors and get rid of some of these. I don't know if I'm going to go sell them or if I'm going to send them to a friend who has started her watercolor journey. I don't know. I've already sent her some, so I don't know if she'll be overwhelmed or not. So I'll have to ask her. But I kind of wish I had learned a little more about pigment before I did start buying paints. And let's be honest, you go to the art store and you see all the pretty paints, and there is, you know, a dopamine hit on getting a pretty new color. But I would like to thin some out. Like I said, I don't regret them. I do, like I said, have some that I was chasing a color. So at one point I had bought some Cotman colors, and I think they just call it turquoise, was just beautiful. Loved it. It is phthalo blue, phthalo green mixed. And I kept trying to find the professional version of it, and it's not in their professional line. So I spent some time trying to hunt down a replacement for that color. And every color I got, and don't get me wrong, I love all my aquas. Every color I got was either a little too blue, a little too green, that kind of thing. And we all know how I feel about mixing. And at that point, I wasn't even real keen on tweaking. Now I don't mind the tweaking so much. So it took a while for me to be like, okay, hold on. I did end up finding one that's pretty close. This is the no, it's the peacock blue. Sorry, Holbein peacock blue, which is probably the closest that I got to that color. And it's still not exact. So some of these came about, like I said, for chasing specific colors or not having dot cards. And so you see them, you see them on the website, or you see them in a pamphlet or whatever. And you think, oh, this is a really pretty color, but you don't really get to see that color. And so that's one reason I'm a huge advocate of dot cards, because they give you so much more information. As I have learned about pigments, there are definitely some suspects here. This one, for instance, is the King's Royal Blue from Daniel Smith. It's a very pretty color. I actually like this for skies, but it is a mix here of, I believe this is ultramarine, phthalo, and just some white. So that was one that I probably could have mixed up on my own, because it's not a hardcore blue in my rotation, but I do like it. So I have stuff like that. And like I said, as I have learned more and realized that a lot of these colors, especially like Daniel Smith has a lot of colors, and I love Daniel Smith and I love all the colors, but I think the fact that some of these are just mixed with white is kind of frustrating, I guess. And it was something I actually didn't realize until those last batch of new colors came out. And I believe the color is, hold me to it, Coral Reef. And it's actually like PO74 and white. Now, in my defense, I never would have guessed that orange would produce a pink pigment when mixed with white. My brain never would have gone there. So when I looked that up and realized that's what it was kind of an eye-opening hold on moment. And since then, I actually haven't really bought a whole lot of Daniel Smith. Most of the colors, the paints I have bought this past year have been Senneliers and M-grams and stuff that I wanted to try out. So that's the other way that I ended up with a lot of colors, is just trying different brands. And I think, we all, I guess, I won't say we all, but a lot of us tend to favor a brand versus another. I'm a little less, I guess, set into that. I have paints from all brands. I am dying to get some A Gallows, but I'm trying not to do that until I get rid of some of the ones I have. But oh my God, I want some A Gallows. But that has also contributed to me having a whole lot of paint. And also sometimes finding, let me see, realizing that there's a difference in colors across different brands. So I have, let's see, 7 different Payne's grays. And that said, if you look at the pigment information, they're all very different Payne's grays. Some of them tend to lead more blue, some of them more black. This one is the Beam, and it actually granulates and has like a brown kind of undertone to it. This is kind of really cool for mountains, by the way. But all of them are a little different. And so if you look at the pigment information, you guys probably have glare. Hopefully that got rid of it. The pigment makeup is all very different in these. And so it's taken me a little while to figure out which ones I like. So that said, I would probably not buy all of these again. I would most likely pick my one that I like the best and go from there. Why? Sorry, okay. Do I have 2 swatches for that? I might. Okay, anyway. 29. No. Okay, just checking. Anyway, sorry, got distracted. I have squirrel brain. So, all these Payne's grays are very different composition-wise, and I think you're going to find one composition that you like. I know some people, again, like to use the M word and mix up their own. So, whatever makes you happy. I personally am more apt to lean towards a more blue one. And that's interesting because that one's probably my favorite right now. And that's the Mayberry Blue, and it is a single pigment. So that's kind of, the reasons I ended up with a lot of these. As I have learned, like I said, there's some I wouldn't grab. There's some that are very similar. But I also learned olive green is one that sticks out in my head. Sap green, for that matter, too. Where I got one brand and really didn't like it. And then grabbed another brand and did like it. So, sometimes you have to find your colors through the brand, especially if you're like me and you just don't want to mix. I don't want to be dependent on mixing everything. You know what? People enjoy mixing, and I think it's fabulous. I do not. It's time consuming. Your results are inconsistent. It's just, to me, it takes me out of painting and the fun of painting, and I just don't like it. So that is, my color collection. Like I said, I am going to go through it and thin some out. I don't know if I'm going to sell them, like I said, or if I'm going to just send them to a friend or donate them somewhere. I don't know yet, but I am going to go through some. It's probably not going to happen soon. We are about to pack up to go to our next contract site. So I'm trying to get a couple of videos in. Hopefully you guys won't notice a delay in videos, but you might. We'll see. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about, having a lot of colors and whether or not you regret them. For the most part, I don't. I do wish I had more information, be it the dot cards. Like, this is another color that I never would have just bought. This is the Phthalo yellow green color. It's a little too neon for me. I do not like neon colors. I just don't. I know you can tweak them. I know you can do all the stuff. I just don't care for them. So that said, that's another color that I would never probably buy again. If I don't get rid of that tube's going to last me for the next 30 years. That said, I will say that it's a fantastic color for kiwi fruit. Ask me how I know. But like I said, there's a lot of these I would 100% buy again. There's some of these that I would not buy again. But I think that's all part of the learning experience as well. You know, finding your feet and seeing what colors you like, and maybe where I'm going, I'll find like an art swap. That would actually be really cool. We need more art swaps. Or hey, I have this color and I don't like it. Let me swap you for something else. But anyway, I don't know if this was helpful or not. I just know that there's a lot of focus right now on not having too many colors, and I am definitely a give me all the colors type. And I don't have that overwhelm that other people do, but I understand why that overwhelm happens. And I do think that understanding your pigments and stuff really can make that better. Yeah. Oh, and I will say that there were a couple times I went to look for a certain color and they didn't have it. And so I ended up buying something that I thought would be the same or close, and then it wasn't. Or a couple of times I have fallen into names where I didn't realize, like Sennelier. The Sennelier blue is just phthalo blue. The Windsor colors, I believe Windsor blue is just a phthalo blue. Windsor purple, which is actually one of my favorite, or is it Windsor violet? I can't remember how it's labeled. It might be Windsor violet. I believe it's just dioxazine purple. But so, like I said, learning pigments and learning how things get labeled makes a huge difference. I'm trying to see. Let me see here. Trying to Windsor. Yeah, Windsor violet is PV23. So, yeah, dioxazine. But it's also, I mean, compared to some of the other dioxazines, it's so vivid. So, again, sometimes you just kind of have to figure it out. And now I've hit a point where I do have a lot of paints, and I'm not really buying a lot of paints, and I have entered that, no or low buy phase, which is cool. I want to use up some of these. I won't lie, I'm really tempted to stock up on the quinacridone colors though, because I know that those pigments are getting really hard to come by, and I have some that are absolute favorites. So Daniel Smith says that they have plenty that will last for a while, but it makes me a little nervous because there are some that I rely on a lot. Let me see. One of my favorites is the quinacridone. Oh, is it Sienna? I'm trying to think how it's labeled. Terra Rosa. That's not it. Is it Daniel Smith? I'll see red gold. Ooh. I don't know where I put it now. Quinacridone Sienna. Yeah. So this is one of my absolute favorite colors, and I use it a lot, and I just find it really useful. It's a beautiful, like, you guys know I tend to lean more towards like the blues and greens and aquas and that kind of thing, but I first got this color and was blown away by it, and immediately had to paint something fall themed because of it. So anyway, having all the colors doesn't make you a bad artist. Wanting to only use a handful of colors does not make you a bad artist. I just want to say, I guess be aware. And I feel like learning your pigments definitely helps keeps some stuff from getting overwhelming or repeating the same basic colors. I definitely have some repeats because I didn't understand pigments very well at the time. And again, those are ones that I just won't rebuy, or I will gift to somebody. You only need one Peril Orange, for instance, that kind of thing. So, just like I said, do what works for you. If you're like me and you like all the colors and you don't like mixing, that's cool. If you want to do a limited palette and you want to mix everything and you don't want to be overwhelmed, also cool. Do what works for you. But I do feel like learning a little bit more about your pigments, which can be kind of boring, quite frankly, will definitely keep you from ending up with a bunch of what amounts to duplicates. And I think that's my biggest regret for having all the colors is the duplicates. And it's so easy to get those, whether you're color chasing or you're going across brands, or, you just see a name that you're like, oh, this will be a pretty color, that kind of thing. So just learn. Don't be ashamed of learning. I feel like these days we have created environments where learning is almost frowned upon, or saying I don't know is not acceptable. Don't fall into that trap. Learn, understand, and curate your colors that make you happy. You're not out here painting for everybody else. You're out here painting for you. So anyway, have a good day. Go out, go paint something, and I will see you guys next time.